Perfect square trinomials. All right, so this is still your 4.5. This is just a super fast method that you can factor trinomials if certain things are occurring. So if you have a trinomial and your first term and your last term is a perfect square and you have a plus sign in front of that last term, that means that you can do a perfect square trinomial. This is a shortcut method. And here's your two formulas for your perfect square trinomial. Now, I'm not going to look at that right now. I'm just going to show you how you work this. And then if you want to see a pattern, you can go up and look at your formula. But I'm not going to even touch on it right now. So the main thing you want to look at is your first and your last term. Your first and your last term have to be able to be taken a perfect square of. So if I can take the perfect square of my x squared, I get x. I can take the perfect square root of my 49 and I get 7. This sign must be a plus before you can do a perfect square trinomial. If it's not a plus, you'll have to do bottoms up. Okay? So I could take the square root of x squared and get x. I could take the square root of 49 and get 7. Whatever this middle sign is here, that plus goes down into your answer, and this is factored form. So all I did was take the square root of the first term, the square root of the last term. I made sure this was a plus, and I brought down the sign of that middle term. And then I put parentheses around it and squared it, and that's in factored form. All right? Now, a lot of people like to check things. I want to check to make sure that this is the correct answer. If you multiply the first times the last times 2, so x times 7 times 2, do you get your middle term? Yes. So this is a check to make sure that you have a perfect square trinomial. The first times the last times 2. 14x is my middle term, so that's a perfect square. So perfect square trinomial works. Yay! Let's go to number 2 and let's do the same thing. So again, I want to check to make sure I have a perfect square trinomial. So the main thing you're looking for if a perfect square trinomial is this sign a plus? Yes. Can I take the square root of my first and my last term? Yes. So this is probably going to be a perfect square trinomial. Let's look and take the square root of 9 and get 3, the square root of x squared and get x. The square root of my last one is 5, square root of 25 is 5. Bring down this minus sign, the sign of the middle term. So I'm going to bring down the minus, and that's in factored form. Again, if you want to check it, I take my first is 3x times 5 times 2. So 5 times 3 is 15 times 2 is 30x. Is that my middle term? Yes. So that means this is a perfect square trinomial. And your answers are the red boxes. So this is what you would type in to your Course Compass homework. Now, could you work these with bottoms up? Yes, of course you could. But this is a shortcut method, and a lot of people like shortcuts. I, for one, love shortcuts. Anything to make my life easier, I'm going to use. A lot of people will not see to use the shortcut method on this one because it's such an easy problem. That's fine. But when you multiply 9 times 5, you're going to get a big number. So anytime you get big numbers, remember I told you to check for GCF, and there is not a GCF on number 2. And if you don't have a GCF, check and see if it's a perfect square trinomial, and that's going to make your life a lot easier. Look at number 3. This is insane to multiply 16 and 25. Nobody wants to do that. Notice that it is not only a perfect square trinomial, but it also has the x squares, the xy, and then the y squares in the problem. So remember what I told you about it was going to have an x in the front, a y in the back. It's not that hard when you're doing the perfect square trinomial. Remember, you always want to check to make sure this is a plus, and it is. So when I take the square root of 16, I get 4. The square root of x squared and get x. The square root of 25, I get 5. The square root of y squared, you get y. So you automatically are going to put that y in your answer, and you're not even going to think about it. That middle term is minus, so it comes down, and your answer is squared. So again, to check, I'm going to multiply 4x times 5y times 2. So 4 times 5 is 20 times 2 is 40xy. Is that my middle term? Yes. So that means that that is the correct answer. So perfect square trinomials are just a shortcut method to help you work problems that would not be fun to work. 16 times 25, this would not be a fun one to work with bottoms up. The only thing you want to do with this one is the perfect square trinomial. I hope this is an awesome method for you to use. I hope you take advantage of it, and if you have any problems with it, let me know.